I started interviewing people and I asked them, if you could live your life over, what would you do differently? I've done this thousands of times with different people. And three things keep coming up consistently all the time. Number one is if I could live my life over, I would be more reflective, meaning I would just step back and look at why didn't I do this? Why did I do that? If it was something that they, brought up fear that kept them stuck. And the second thing they said consistently, if they could live their life over again, was, I would have been more courageous. And I said, well, like, give me an example. They said, well, I stuck with my career because it was a job and I had to make a living. But if I could live my life over, I wish I would have followed my instinct to be an artist rather than go to law school or do, whatever. So the two areas were work and love. Sigmund Freud had it right, the two big areas. And the third thing was mattering matters. Every single human being that I've had the privilege of interviewing or interacting with at a deeper level like that said, I want to leave my dent. I want to leave my thumbprint.
Welcome to the Live Brave podcast. I'm Margie Worrell. Here you'll learn how to live and lead with more courage in an increasingly anxious world. If you'd love to bring your bravest self to your biggest challenges and the boldest vision for your life, you are in the right place. Let's get started. Hello there, Margie here. I'm so glad to be back with you today for the Live Brave podcast. I have a really wonderful conversation to share with you today with Richard Leider, a man whose work I have admired for many years. He's written 11 books, and his probably most famous book, The Power of Purpose, has just come out in its fourth edition. One thing that I didn't know about Richard prior to starting our conversation today is that he has worked and studied with two of the most legendary psychologists of the last century. Abraham Maslow, you've probably heard of Maslow's pyramid, yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but also perhaps even more profoundly impactful for me, Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And he shares in our conversation today how those two legends in their own time had a pretty strong disagreement, and how Abraham Maslow ultimately conceded that Frankl was correct in how he saw that we can live the most meaningful lives. Richard himself has lived a very meaningful life. Besides working, studying with lots of legends, he was sharing how he's about to head to Costa Rica to lead a retreat with John Kabat-Zinn, who's sort of the founding father of mindfulness. He has also done lots of programs across the world. I think Forbes called him one of the top 5 coaches of our time. And yeah, he is a man who has a lot of wisdom and has dedicated his life to sharing his insights, particularly in the realm of purpose and what it takes for us to live a more meaningful, purposeful life and why that matters. And Richard is now in his 80s. And as you will see, as you will hear, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it, wherever you listen to podcasts, he is filled with life and vitality. And he is really just a beautiful example of what it is to age strong in connection, in community, contributing daily to elevating others. So I know you will get a lot from listening to our podcast today. Before we jump in, a quick shout out. My upcoming retreat with the Modern Elder Academy is now just over a month away. Please check it out. If you would really love to reset on a future vision that is more meaningful for you, pop over to Modern Elder Academy or click on a link in the show notes. I also encourage you to check out my new LinkedIn learning program on how to activate the courage within you, which requires you finding your big why. Why does it matter? Because unless you're clear about why something matters to break ranks with your comfort zone, you probably won't. And of course, if you enjoy this podcast, I would love it if you would share it, if you'd subscribe, rate, and review. Now, on with my inspiring conversation with the one and only and very remarkable Richard Leider. Well, Richard, thank you so much for being on the Live Brave podcast with me today. I'm delighted to have you here.
Me too. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I have been following your work and known who you are for quite a few years. You've been around a while.
I have.
Yeah, and obviously you have a lot of wisdom and insight on many things that relate to, I mean, obviously the focus of my work is on helping people live bigger, braver lives, but foundational to that
Yeah,
is this concept of purpose and living purposefully. And that's obviously the heart of what your work and I guess you might say your purpose is in the world. So can you
right.
just share with listeners who may not be as familiar with you, like what's your journey that led you to the work that you've been doing?
Well, first of all, I talk about not finding your purpose, but unlocking your purpose. So it's in here. You have to have courage to bring it out and to act because it's a verb. It, action precedes clarity. So I got out of graduate school in counseling psychology way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth in the 60s. And I was trying to figure out what to do with this. The Vietnam War was on, there was a lot of things happening. And I saw on a bulletin board that Viktor Frankl was doing a workshop in San Diego, and I had been a student in graduate school, and I signed up and went and spent a week with Viktor Frankl. And that was the unlocking for me of what is this purpose thing? The purpose is a choice. It's something we activate every day. And for those who don't know Viktor Frankl, he wrote the seminal book on purpose called Man's Search for Meaning, based on his experiences. He was a neurologist, a psychiatrist in Vienna, but his whole family was taken to Auschwitz, to the concentration camps. He's the only one who survived. He got out of there, wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning in 9 days after healing. And so it was life changing. And I'm sure that most of your listeners have had fortuitous encounters with people who have really brought out their own courage, their own relevance, their own choices. And Frankl did that for me as well as many others along the way that I could talk about. But that was kind of the launch of me on the purpose path. So there's many, many fortuitous encounters and choices along the way and so just this last year, Power of Purpose book came out in its fourth edition. Now, how many books have come out 40 years later, 20 years on the bestseller list in a fourth edition? Well, a fourth edition has uh, 50% new content and 10,000 fewer words. So, the point here I make and end with is I'm a learner. The future belongs to the learners, not the knowers. And I know about purpose, but I'm learning about purpose. And from you too, and from your work and your writing, that connectivity almost every day.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Well, firstly, I want to just pause and acknowledge the gift of you having time with Viktor Frankl. And I read
Well,
Man's Search for Meaning probably the first time 20 years ago. And then I reread it on a vacation about 10 years ago. And it was like I was reading it again for the first time. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
so compelling. And I have shared that book many times with people and said, you must read it. I think it's a book every human on earth would benefit from reading,
yeah, yeah.
as well as your own, of course. But
Yeah, yeah.
because
I
he,
acknowledge him every time I speak. I acknowledge his impact and his writing, and I recommend it as well as, of course, my own books. But I recommend it. He talked a lot, with all that's going on in the world, we're today, and in Minneapolis, where I live, for example, Minnesota. But he talked about tragic optimism. How do you remain optimistic with tragic? So I still refer to and read about that with him.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously what he endured, anyone who endured the Holocaust, it was beyond anything that any person who's been gifted with a life that you haven't had to deal with, like that level of
Yeah,
utter inhumanity, it's impossible to know what that would be. I mean,
yeah,
I've interviewed Holocaust survivors before, and
yeah,
I know, but it's impossible to the lived experience of that. But I'm
yeah.
curious. What I'm fascinated about is the fourth edition of your book has just come out. I know it has sold, there's millions of people who have read it. And I recommend everyone to get a copy of the newest edition. But over the years, your own learning in purpose, because I have a really strong sense of purpose myself. I've just had this very strong kind of call on me for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people say, Margie, you just got so much clarity about what you're on earth to do, and it drives you. But I don't even know. Like I don't relate to any of that. Like I'm just like going through the motions. I don't really feel like I'm here for some big thing. I don't even know if I'm here for a little thing. I mean, this whole idea of find your purpose or unlock your purpose. It's like, there's a lot of people who are kind of cynical.
Yeah. Well,
And
I get that pushback like you apparently do. And I start every talk now, so I want to mention it, with talking about purpose with a big P and purpose with a little p. So purpose with a big P is, oh, it's too big. And people have what I call purpose anxiety. I'm not big enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not you, I don't write those books, etc. And I say, well, purpose with a little p is what you do with your life on a day-to-day basis, the choice you make. There are 1,440 purpose moments in a day. Those times where you could step up and give somebody else hope, a kind word, a hug, an email, a phone call, or something. So if you do little p purpose on a day-to-day basis, that will end up being, however you name it, your big P purpose, your legacy, and it'll help you overcome purpose anxiety. Because everybody, even in the concentration camp, even meaning he said the last of the human freedoms is choice. You can give somebody else a kind word, a slurp of soup, a hug, hope for the future, and it may not make you survive, but it'll help you survive in dire circumstances. So there's the big P and little p purpose. And the second thing, though, I would add to that I have learned and teach is that purpose is not a luxury for the few, the educated, the certain whatever status of people. Purpose is fundamental. It's fundamental to health, healing, happiness, and ultimately to longevity. So the surprising science now, when I bring the science up for people, that's like it's irrefutable, whether you agree with it or not. The science is there. So I've had a chance. I did a PBS special showing 400 cities across the U.S. And before that, PBS sent me out to visit neuroscientists, doing purpose in the brain, purpose in Alzheimer's, purpose in sleep apnea, purpose in longevity. I got to interview a lot of those people and quote them. And so I think what, unlocking is about small p purpose, and that it's fundamental. And that purpose anxiety, we all struggle with it at some point in our lives, thinking that, well, I'm just not enough. But we need to make the little p purpose choices. Purpose is a
mm,
verb, as I said.
you just made me think of something my dad said to me once. So my dad, Richard, left school at 16, kind of only semi-literate, and milked cows for 50 years, morning and night,
Wow.
never left the
Wow.
farm, very,
Yeah.
you know, not a big life, a pretty humble life. And he shared with me probably 15 years ago, he said, Margie, for many years, as I was getting up every morning and rounding up the cows, milking cows, and, there was droughts, there was times where we'd just get by in terms of just looking after his family, just food on the table sort of thing. And
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
said, for many years, and he's got a very strong faith. And he said, I would say
Yeah.
to God, God, is
Yeah.
this my purpose to milk cows every morning and milk cows every evening for just decades? And there's no 4 weeks annual vacation,
Right.
just a life of a lot of, manual labor. And he said he was well into his 50s, and he felt that God spoke to him and said, yes, this is your purpose, to be a good father, to be a good husband, to be a good community member and neighbor. And this is your purpose.
Yeah.
And I think he was the purpose anxiety of, am I supposed to be doing something big in the world?
Yeah.
And, raising your family and being a good human and a good neighbor in like what was like a very humble life, like that's the purpose. And I think
Yeah.
it's easy, I know myself, and I share pretty, transparently here. I feel called to empower millions and write books, and I have never sold as many books as you have. And it's easy to get caught up and look at the big lights and go, oh, if it's not reaching millions and millions, am I failing in my purpose? Am I falling short of what I'm supposed to be doing? And I know for me, there's almost been a reckoning of, if you show up every day consistently, doing the best you can with what you have, trying to do it with integrity and character and kindness and courage, then you're on purpose. It's not
Right.
always the external outcome you may or result.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I recommend, and I'm recommending to your listeners and your readers that they take out a little post-it, and
Oh, I've
I
got
have one of
some
those.
right here.
Yeah, I have, and write on that post-it two words: grow and give, and put that post-it because ultimately that's the subtitle. The new subtitle of the Power of Purpose is to grow and give for life. Yeah. So you put that on your mirror, and when you wake up in the morning, you ask yourself, how am I going to grow and give today? And at the end of the day, you ask yourself, how did I do? Did I grow? Did I learn something today? Did I read something? Did I, you know, and how did I give today? And if you do that for a week, you will have a felt sense of that purpose thing. And I think your
Mm,
father was growing. I don't know how he was growing, but he was giving on a regular basis, and that sustained him in certain ways, even though he didn't have the fancy books to read or that kind of thing at the time, perhaps. But I think that growing and giving, and one of the reasons it's important to do that is that I write about this, but it's so do you, is isolation is fatal.
mhm,
Loneliness is a big deal right now for a whole lot of
mhm.
people for a whole lot of reasons. And so I was recently on a speaking gig in Denver, Colorado, and I got to the Denver airport and I called for Uber to take me to my hotel, and I got into the Uber, and the driver looked at me and he said, "Where are you going?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, Hotel Moxie, isn't that for only young people?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm pretty hip. It doesn't matter if the age." But
I've stayed at
he's
that
and
Moxie in Denver, by the way,
yeah,
Cherry Creek.
yeah, exactly. So then he took the rearview mirror and he turned it and he said, "You know how old I am?" And I said, because I told him that I was going to give a talk on aging at the Nobel Institute at Denver University. And he said, "Well, what are you going to talk about aging?" And he said, "You know how old I am?" And I said, No. And you don't know how old I am either." And he said, "I'm 83. I went, "Wow, 83. What got you to drive Uber at the age of 83?" And he said, "I retired and I was alone. My identity, my people that were I was close to, and then I thought it would be a breeze, but it wasn't. And then my wife got ill, and my purpose was to take care of her. Then she died. So no job, no spouse, no reason to get up in the morning, which purpose is ultimately why. Why do you do what you do? Why do you get up
Mhm.
in the morning? And he said, I'm an extrovert. I was a salesperson. I need to meet people like you, he said, although he didn't know me from Adam. And so he said to me, "Mr. Leider, I hope you're teaching people that isolation is fatal. Going it alone, not a good idea. Your father had community, had other
Mhm.
things that a lot of people today don't. And so they need to find a purpose partner or a purpose
Mhm.
community of some sort. And so the daily small p purpose helps them to open up and unlock that possibility."
Amen. And as you know, in Frankel's book, he talked about daily victories. And I often think of that, like
Yeah,
every day, what are my daily victories? I showed up. I was
yeah,
kind. I
right.
did something even though I didn't feel like doing it. I was
Yeah,
brave in a
yeah,
moment when my fear was calling me to play it safe,
yeah,
like that's
yeah.
my daily victories.
That's wonderful. That's to grow and give. That's what I summarize it in
Yeah.
simple terms. And the other thing was, I was the only outside speaker recently at something called the American Academy of Lifestyle Medicine. It's an actual division of the American Medical Association. So it's not, American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Purpose and spirituality they did a conference on just purpose and spirituality. I was the only non-researcher, non-scientist there. And they said, "We wanted you to speak and be on our panel because we don't know how to get our message out to people. That purpose, whether it's religious
Uh-huh.
or spiritual, and we need practices. So what I trade in is practices. You're only as good as your practices, and action precedes clarity. If you have practice daily, it will lead to that sense of peace and clarity that we seek, even if we're isolated and have our adversities like Frankl represented for us.
I'm curious. You just mentioned a moment ago about, purpose may or may not have a spiritual element to it or
Right.
religious element to it. I mentioned earlier how I feel a sense of calling, and
Yeah.
I have a really strong faith. To me, my spiritual life
Me
is
too.
really foundational to who I
Yeah.
am and the
Hmm.
work I do. It's what's driven me, inspired me for
Yeah.
decades. Not everybody has a strong connection to a spiritual self or a spiritual realm.
Right.
Certainly, some people may be anti-religious. They might have certainly definitely no religious practice, so to speak. So to people who go, well, if purpose is about something bigger than yourself, if it's about giving to others and it's not just like how do they make sense of that? And how do you make sense of the relationship between our spirituality and for those people, and like for instance for myself, I feel a sense of calling, that
Yeah.
is beyond
Yeah.
me.
Hmm.
um how would you link those two? What's the
Yeah.
relationship there?
Well, first of all, I took a year off and went to the seminary to study purpose in world religions. And I found after a year that every major religion, and I think I covered almost all of them at the time, has purpose in their own language as something beyond yourself. And it's whether you call it giving or service or um, whatever. And so I studied it that way. But and then Frankel, getting back to him for a minute, when I was with him, he drew a line, a horizontal line, and he said, this is success from low success to high success. And we measure that often on outside variables and money or other things. Then he drew the vertical line. He said, this represents fulfillment from despair to meaning at the top. So you've got 4 boxes now. And the left box was job. I just have a job. It's not too successful, not too fulfilling, but it pays the bills, maybe like your dad in certain ways. I don't know. And then on the right hand box, up the success ladder, but still lower, he called it career. And he said many people that he has written about and talked with have what he calls EV, existential vacuum. They are not necessarily burned out, but they've been there, done that. It's not as fulfilling. They're not growing, etc. Then he went to the upper left-hand box. So, where success,
Hmm.
fulfillment, the upper left-hand box was mission. And he said some people have a mission, the job pays the bills, but they have a mission in their church or they have a mission in their community with their family, etc. But then he went to the upper right-hand box. And then he said, this is called calling. He said, job, career, mission, calling. So I became a student of calling, and my formula is the formula for purpose. And it has 3 things: gifts plus passions plus values equals calling. I hear you saying, Margie, that you're following your calling. You're using your gifts for what we're doing right now, and you're writing, and you're on things you feel purposeful or passionate about in an environment. I'm not sure about that part for you that fulfills fits your values.
Hmm.
So for many people, they can step back. I call it the napkin test. Take out a napkin because people who ask me to find out what I do say, well, Richard, I call it the Got a Minute School of Coaching. Got a minute? Can you tell me what I should do? How do I discover my purpose or whatever? And I said, take out this napkin. This was discovered by me on an airplane when I was sitting next to somebody who had seen a PBS special. And he said, can I talk to you? And I said, I'm writing a speech right now. I was on my way to London at the time. And so I said, write down G plus P plus V equals C. Gifts plus passions plus values equals calling. If you can answer those 3 queries or questions, it'll give you a clue. It may not answer it exactly, but it'll give you a clue.
Yeah.
And so calling to me is a vocational word in certain ways, or a spiritual word, I should
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
for purpose. And
Yeah.
so when I work with people, I work with that formula. gifts
Yeah.
plus passions
And
plus
I think
values, and you
sometimes,
can represent that yourself, can't you? I
yeah,
mean, in your own
yeah.
work and
And
life.
I
Yeah,
actually think I wrote about this in my book, Stop Playing Safe. I had first chapter is lead from why.
yeah,
And the research around people who see what they do as a job versus a career versus a vocation,
right,
that they can't not teach. They love teaching or being a
right,
whatever it is. I mean, that
right,
that can be a broad spectrum of things. And it's okay if what you see is a job because sometimes we have to pay the bills and
right.
it's a job. I've had
Yeah,
jobs over my life and a job is okay. I mean, that is
yeah,
completely worthy when you're providing for your
yeah.
family or whatever. And we can
But
get
that
that.
it doesn't preclude you from making a difference in one person's life today for 1 minute,
Mm,
1,440 minutes in a day, and take sleep out of it, and it's less. But every I can get off right here when we're done and make a difference in someone's life by a phone call, an email, a hug, a kind word, and so that's purposeful. But there's a felt sense to calling. It's as
yeah.
you said, it's and so if it's not in your job, there are other ways that you can manifest
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And something you've mentioned a few times, and people sometimes talk about this. So people might be really good at something, but they don't have a passion for it. I
They
was good
might
at
have they might have had, but maybe they're in midlife and they're done. They've done it, but
Yeah,
do I have to
they
stay
maybe did
stuck in
have
this
it
or
or yep,
yeah,
I mean, I was good at math, but I never ever wanted to go down the engineering or mathematic path in my career.
yeah,
Um, they might have a passion for something, but they're not necessarily overly gifted at it.
that's right. Yeah,
And I think as we go through life, and this is where I'm curious, like even the fourth edition of your book, you've taken out 10,000 words, you've added in new things, you're
right.
learning, you're
Yeah,
discovering the expression of your purpose takes slightly different forms. Your book's got a new form in
yeah,
one sense.
yeah,
And I think as we go through life, so often the things that can give us a sense of purpose can come from our wounds, can come from our heartaches and
yeah,
our struggles.
yeah,
And I wouldn't feel the passion I do around my work if I didn't have to have had overcome things that had made me feel really fearful or really
yep,
anxious or riddled with self-doubt.
yep,
And I think for all of us, I mean, each of us has a different imprint. None of us are the same. It's whatever that is. It may
yeah,
sound the same, but it doesn't look the same.
right.
To someone who's listening to this and they're thinking, well, I once thought I knew what my purpose was and now I don't. I'm a little disillusioned.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, first of all, as I said before, isolation is fatal. Don't go it alone.
Mm,
And so oftentimes, I think it was Leonard Cohen in his music anthem. I think he quoted from Rumi. He says, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
mm,
There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." So often, purpose quest or question or journey comes up when there's a crack and the light gets in. How does the light get in? Well, one of the ways the light gets in is through having a sounding board. I wouldn't coach anybody. I don't coach now. I write and speak and do other projects, but I wouldn't coach anybody, no matter how famous they were. And many of them were famous, unless they had a sounding board. Somebody who they could be, as you said earlier, transparent with, who they could talk with and be listened to. So, in a sounding board, there are four characters that I say minimally one person who's your committed listener who you can talk with about what's really up with you in the crack with it or whatever. And then secondly, wise elder, somebody who's been down the path and might have that comes from books like yours and others, or it could come from somebody who's in their family or not. And then the third is a wise younger, somebody who asks questions about the why questions in many ways. And then the fourth is a purpose partner, somebody who actually holds your feet to the fire. You say you want this, uh, what did you do about it today? And so
mm.
purpose partner is not judging you in assessments, but is asking you to step up to what you committed to. So I know I'm sure your listeners have one of these. It's just
Mhm.
called an iPhone or a cell phone.
Mhm.
And I have a colleague of mine who, when you answer or when you call and he doesn't answer, but he leaves a message, he says this: at the sound of the tone, please leave your answer to life's two eternal questions. Who are, who are you and what do you want? Well, the the purpose sounding board is who are you and what do you want,
What do
and
you
having
want?
that conversation with at least a committed listener. And the committed listener often is, or not often, but can be not your spouse or your partner or your, it could be, sometimes people I hear on a airplane, they said, geez, I never talked to anybody about this before. And now I'm listening, I'm listening to them. I'm not coaching them. So I think, as I said, having a purpose team on your side. And so people often go to workshops like yours. And I know we're both teaching at Modern Elder Academy in midlife. People look at their job career calling and say, push the pause button and say, yeah, I'm done. But what's next? So the next what's next question comes up. And then going it alone, they go there because they find committed listeners, people they can talk with and hopefully go forward with and support after that or at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Chip Conley, who we both know, a friend,
Yeah,
in founding Modern Elder Academy, was in response to the need he felt for so many people in the middle
right.
years saying, okay, I've done all of this. I've been building, creating, earning, striving, accumulating. Now what? What do I
Well,
want most for the second half or
right.
the last quarter of my life or the last
Yeah,
third? And
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I'm really excited
yeah,
to
yeah,
be leading my
yeah.
retreat there next month.
My
I
book, by the way, I want to mention, in addition to The Power of Purpose, but the one that came out just before that is based on the question that you shouldn't ask young people, but you were probably asked, and you might, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, my book right before the fourth edition was not what do you want to do? It's who do you want to be when you grow old? The
mm,
path of purposeful aging. And so purpose comes up. Purpose is basically age agnostic. It can come up young, midlife, old. I mean, I'm 81. I'll be 82 soon. I am still, another bad word, I'm still writing, speaking, doing things I love to do with my calling. I'm still called. And so people say, well, can't you retire? Why don't you retire? And I said, well, why would I want to do that when I love that what I do so
heck
much? I
no.
don't ha-
Yeah.
I don't have to do it at the same velocity as I used to, but I can choose and do things like the Modern Elder Academy and many other things that I love to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, the fulfillment, the meaning, what you get, the connectivity you get from that,
Right.
that is what it is to age well.
Yeah.
And when I think about purpose, to me, a key reason I've always been really passionate and fascinated and a student of it myself is, you know, I believe that for us to live well, yes, we need to live bravely, which means often we need to do things that are uncomfortable, things that a self-protective part of us doesn't want to do, like
Yeah.
to reach out to someone you don't know, to try and build a new community, to
Right.
put your hand up, to speak up, to put yourself out there, to make a change, whatever that is. But we have to be able to answer the question for the sake of what am I
Right.
willing to be brave?
Hmm.
And that's where purpose comes in. For the sake of what? What is the purpose
Right.
that is compelling you to break ranks with your comfort zone, compelling you to venture onto new ground, to do something where you are inviting uncertainty and the potential of failure or rejection? And so purpose and courage to me are this virtuous cycle. Each feeds the other. And so fear, which is just part
Yep.
of the human condition, I believe can work against us living purposefully, live
Yeah.
against us living bravely, our fear of not being enough, our fear of falling short, our fear of being exposed as unworthy. What's your experience and observation of how fear can keep people from living as purposefully as in a deep part of them they really want to live?
Well, I would go back to what I said about a sounding board or a committed listener, et cetera, and not going it alone. And if there's a crack, often that brings up fears, often brings up isolation and things like that. So having a purpose partner or, I started many years ago interviewing people over the age of 65. My father had worked at the same place for 40 years, retired right on time at 65, and died less than 2 years later, as many other people did. And that kind of grabbed me to look at purpose from Why did he cheat? What happened? And so I started interviewing people and I asked them, if you could live your life over, what would you do differently? I've done this thousands of times with different people, and three things keep coming up consistently all the time. Number one is, if I could live my life over, I would be more reflective, meaning I would just step back and look at, why didn't I do this? Why did I do that? And oftentimes I said, well, when you did step back, and it was usually cancer, divorce, job loss, community breakdown of some sort, but it was something that they, brought up fear that kept them stuck. And secondly, so reflection. The second thing they said consistently, if they could live their life over again, was, I would have been more courageous, playing right into your fine work. And I said, well, like, give me an example. They said, well, I stuck with my career because it was a job and I had to make a living. But if I could live my life over, I wish I would have followed my instinct to be an artist rather than go to law school or do, whatever. And the third thing, so the two areas were work and love. Sigmund Freud had it right. The two big areas were often, I wish I would have been more courageous in conversations and relationships with people, and to include work and family and etc. And then the third thing, so reflect, courage, or risk taking. And the third thing was mattering matters. Every single human being that I've had the privilege of interviewing or interacting with at a deeper level like that said, I want to leave my dent. I want to leave my thumbprint. Somehow your dad wanted to leave his thumbprint. It wasn't perfect, but it sounds like he left it with you and with others. So when I talk with people who are olders, there is value in gray hair, which I have, and that is, they look over and they as Chip Connolly talks about being a mentor and an intern. They can learn from younger people, but they can also mentor younger people to be more courageous, to reflect, to look at their choices like Frankl did, and others. And, one of the other people that I had a chance to interact with just the year before he died was Abraham Maslow.
Wow.
The
That's,
hierarchy of needs.
yeah.
Often people today quote it endlessly, but they're wrong, because just before he died, he said the top of the Maslow hierarchy is not um, self-fulfillment, it's transcendence. And he and Frankl actually got together because they disagreed vehemently before he died, before Maslow died, at the end of which, in his final writing, he said, Frankl was right. It's about self-transcendence. You have to grow in order to give. So self-fulfillment is important in order to do something for the sake of others, as you said. And so, it all fits together in certain ways. And one last idea about this for people who are working. So I used to have, a long time before I created my own platform and my own writing, I was one of the top human resource officers at what is now called First, U.S. Bank. It used to be called First Bank. But I had a side hustle way back when, and it was called Lunch Hour Limited. You buy me lunch and I'll coach you. So as a human resource officer, the CEO didn't think this was a great idea for me coaching people. And I said, well, it's my lunch hour. They're buying me lunch, but I hardly ever ate lunch because I was so intent on giving, growing and giving. And I found that a lot of very successful people at the bank at that time were not following their calling, and were not happy, although they were successful in the external world. So I think Lunch Hour Limited, I did the napkin test, grow, and I found people couldn't do that without some support, somebody to listen to, somebody to talk to. And I was that person in what was Lunch Hour Limited at the time. So there's a lot of ways into that, but interviewing older people, I just said, you don't want to get to this point, and maybe you're 40 when you're 65 and wish you'd live somebody else's life.
Oh
All
man,
right.
I think that's where, I often do with clients and talk about, written about,
Yeah.
consulting your future self. Put yourself into the shoes of you at
Yeah.
80 looking back, at 90 looking back, and going, what would
Right.
that older, wiser version of you want you to be doing right now? And tap in, because it actually creates the levers, the power of regret. Like, what do I
Yeah.
not want to regret?
right,
And I had that a few years ago. Actually, my mum passed away in 2020 3, and there was the gift of someone passing that you love is that it underscores what's precious about life. That,
right,
just and also the finite nature of life.
right.
And I look a little like my mom, and I was like, "Man, I'm gonna look like that one day, some version of that, and I'm gonna die."
Yeah,
And when I look back, what is it that I think I want to have done differently, more of, less of? And it was so clear for me I needed to leave a role that I was a
yeah,
senior partner at a big consulting firm, and I was like, "I have to leave." I feel like I am gonna say I stayed too long, when I was
yeah,
called to be doing other things in the world that I
right,
couldn't
yeah,
do. And so for all of us, I think there is
yeah,
so much power in just
yeah,
transport yourself into the shoes of you at a future point in time and ask yourself,
right,
what if I stay my current course?
yeah.
Do I risk looking back on with
uh,
some level of
yeah.
regret that I
And that's
didn't
why
do?
on the sounding board, I suggest committed listener, of course, but then a wise elder and a wise younger to give yourself some perspective, like your mother gave you. I think she would even. I'm sorry to say she's deceased, but even as she's deceased, you could say, "What would my mother say about this? What
Oh
was the
yeah.
question that
Yeah. Yeah.
she'd ask about that?" And you can see behind me here, I'm in my office in my house, and these are African artifacts, and I've been leading walking safaris in Africa for 30 years, and sitting around with elders. I mean, I wrote a book once a while back called "Claiming Your Place at the Fire," and that was based on my insights from elders who were sitting around the fire in Africa. And I was asking them, "How do you become an elder, and why do you do what you do?" And one of the elders at the time said, "Richard, you're writing this book. You're asking us all these questions." He was a Hadza, and a Hadza is a hunter gatherer. This hunter gatherers have been around for time eternal, and he was about late 70s, which is quite old for a Hadza. They don't live that long. He said through a translator, I could do it in Swahili, but he speaks an ancient Khoisan Click language. He said, "Richard, do you know what the two most important days in the life of a Hadza are? A Hadza elder?" And I said, "No." And he said, "The two most important days are the day you're born and you overcome child uh, death. And the second most important day is the day you determine why you were born." Geez,
Mm,
this guy has never been more than 50 kilometers from where we're sitting. I've studied all over the world and interviewed people. And he's teaching me that
yeah.
to survive, you need to health, but you also need purpose. You need and we need
Right.
as elders to help the youngers figure out why they're here because they're all, and now I'm translating, they all have different languages. Some of them are hunters, some of them are gatherers, some are neither of those, but are, good community members. And so purpose is fundamental and universal. It's worldwide. I've taught all over the world. I've taught everything from the National Football League to the State Department purpose. And it never fails me that people, even if they don't go public right there, they'll say, uh, I need to discover this.
Yeah, well, I think, and so much of what you've said is pointed to, yes, we have to grow ourselves, that quest for our own self
Yeah,
actualization, to use Maslow's work. But
that's right. Yeah,
ultimately, when we boil it all down, if it's just about us, it's pretty hollow and empty.
that's right.
And it has got to be about how we impact others. And it makes me
Yeah.
think of when I was writing The Courage Gap, my last book,
Yeah,
I
it's a
felt
great
like
book, by the way. Yeah,
Oh,
I love it.
thank you. Thank you. But
Yeah,
I had a few moments of feeling really vulnerable, and our ego can mess us up, and I was like, "Oh, I could be judged, and I'm not as good a writer as this person or that." And I would be overcome with all
yeah,
this fear and doubt. And I
yeah,
sat there one day and I channeled my mum, and she'd passed
yeah,
only about 9 months earlier, and I was like, "Mum,
yeah,
what do you want me to know?" Like, I always used to be able to call her for some assurance. And
yeah.
it was so clear, and she just said, "Write to serve, not to impress." And
Wow,
it
that's
was
great.
just it spoke into the truth of what I already knew, but I needed that kind of reminder, just right to serve people, not to impress anyone. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in looking good and,
Right.
getting the scores on the board and getting the house and the whatever it is, those
Yeah.
external
Yeah.
things. But,
Yeah.
are you lifting other people, serving other people in some way, shape, or form, whether in a small little tiny way or in a big
Yeah.
way, but in
Yeah,
any way? And
Big P, little P purpose. Always, I look around and I get almost a palpable sigh of relief. Oh, I can do little P purpose, but the big P purpose, that's purpose anxiety for so many people. The American essayist E.B. White uh, gives one of my most favorite quotes on purpose. He says this: "I arise in the morning, torn between a desire to save the world and a desire to savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day."
yeah.
Well, I think it makes it easier to plan the day because it's not just about turning your life over to be Mother Teresa or Gandhi or Viktor Frankl. It's to serve it is savoring is great. Nothing wrong with that. But at midlife and in retirement, if it's all about savoring, we call that narcissism. We call it a
Uh-huh.
lot of different things.
Uh-huh.
And you're not going to be happy without the serve part
It
in
is.
some
Well,
way, even if it's just in your immediate family. It doesn't have to be
yeah.
big,
Well,
but it has to be beyond yourself.
you made me think of two things. Albert Schweitzer, the great,
Yeah.
theologian, but also physician, he said, I don't know who among you will be happy, but I do know it will be those who have sought how to serve. And
Yeah.
but Mother Teresa said, and I want to kind of finish with this because you just mentioned her, because we're not all called to be Mother Teresa, but she said, not all of us are called to do great things, but all of us are called to do small things with great love.
Right. It's a
And I think,
beautiful summary of our conversation, quite
yeah,
frankly.
like, how do we
Yeah.
put a little more love into what we're doing, whether it's folding socks and laundry or driving our kids to soccer or just,
Yeah. Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
speak to the checkout
Yeah.
persons.
Well, the
Yeah.
new structure of the power of purpose has three P's: path and practice. So presence means being present to people. That's enough. It can be, witness to other people's lives in certain ways. Path is what you choose to do with the next phase of your life or with the phase you're in right now. And so many people that we've been talking about, maybe at midlife, let's say, are looking at, well, I've been on this path, but that's no longer serving me. What I want to do is serve others, or I want to figure out something different that's fulfilling. And then practice. What are your practices? We're only as good as our practices. So the practice of putting the
Oh,
post-it
sticky
on your
notes. Yeah.
mirror with grow and give is a simple practice. The napkin test is not so simple, but it's a good practice. Having a sounding board is fundamental to can be a good practice. So what I try to share is presence is you have to feel it. Purpose is a felt sense, not just a thing on the wall.
Yeah.
And then path is making choices and not going it alone. And then practice. What are your practices, regardless of your age or stage of life?
Yeah. Well, Richard, I just want to say a very heartfelt thank you for sharing your wisdom with me and with so many others. And I don't know if I've ever spoken to someone who worked and studied with both Viktor Frankl and Maslow, Abraham Maslow. Honestly, they're names that I have, stood at
Yeah,
revered for my entire, adult life.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
I've been
I've,
very. I could name others, but I have been very fortunate to have fortuitous encounters that changed my life. And I think that your listeners have had fortuitous encounters. And stepping back and reflecting on those and making choices with courage and mattering are all, fundamental to unlocking the power of purpose.
well, I would call this a fortuitous encounter as well. That's going on my board. And thank you again. And
Yeah.
and once again, congratulations on all your work, and thank you for all your
Thank,
work.
yeah. Thank you. And thank you for having me on. It's been a real privilege.
I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. And if so, I would love it if you'd take a moment to rate and review it. Of course, if you haven't subscribed, please do. And if you found it even a little bit encouraging, I'd like you to think about who in your life could do with a little encouragement right now. We are braver together than we can ever be alone. Take care. I'll see you again soon.